All right, hello everyone. I'm Madison. We're the Community Capitals team.
I'm Tanisha.
I'm Dewey.
And I'm Meenakshi, majoring in political science. So, our project was analyzing Iowa counties using the community capital framework. So, to analyze 99 counties in Iowa, we used the community capital framework built at ISU itself and used worldwide. So before we deep dive into our project, I would like to explain what does community and capital stand for in that framework. Communities are not just a place on map. It's are just not just a place on map. It's how people collaborate on common goals, support and help each other, work together and live in same area and share resources and knowledges. For capitals, it's more about something valuable that can be used to improve people's lives. Capitals can be like tangible, like roads and schools, and intangible, like trust and leadership. So, the community capital framework majorly talks about seven capitals: human capital, social capital, political capital, built capital, natural capital, financial capital, and cultural capital. Here, you guys can see the best indicators that represent those capitals. Like for human capitals, it's more about knowledge, skill, and health. For natural capital, it's about land, water, climate, environmental quality. So, as we know, like what does community capital stand for, we would like to explore how these capitals interact with each other to make things happen in a community. Suppose a community wants to build a pool. So to make that pool happen, it requires lots five capitals to work together. First, financial capital for money, political capital for permissions, human capitals for skilled labor force, social capitals to really support for that pool to happen, and build capitals for land. So now we know like how does capitals interact with each other. We ask a basic question in start of this project: what makes a community strong? What define a strong communities? And the answer seems simple, but the question seems simple, but answer is complex. Some communities are strong in schools, hospitals, and internet. Some communities may be strong in local leadership, cultural tradition, and small businesses. Same goes for Iowa's. Like in so many rural counties, they are strong in social and cultural capital, but lacks in broadband access or basic hospital access. And same goes if we talk about urban counties like Polk County, it has like good job opportunities, but lacks in affordable housing. So as we know that communities urban or rural, they are strong in something and lacking strength in some areas. To help counties build on their strength and tackle these challenges, we asked three core questions for this project. What strengths already exist in this community? What challenges might be holding it back? And what could be the right kind of support that make the biggest difference for that community? For data sources, we use reliable public data from several sources. For different capitals, their data sources are different. For example, for social capital, we use data from Iowa Culture App, ACS 5 Year, US Religious Census, State Library of Iowa, and Travel Iowa. Why this project is important and what makes it unique. In the beginning of this project, we acknowledge the very fact that every county is unique and no one solution fits all counties. So we acknowledge that facts, and we have used data from trusted public sources. And this project will help local leaders to make smart decisions by doing targeted investment in areas where communities are lacking strengths. And it this project also support more equitable outcomes. When I say more equitable outcomes, what I means, when planning is grounded in real local conditions, it became more effective and more inclusive, and which make it more meaningful to people it serves. And who can use this information? To use this information, we figured out like extension staff working in counties to guide program and outreach. Non-profit organizations want to run a community drive, state agencies and local leaders. So throughout this program, we'll explore three key themes. The first theme talk about classification of patterns. When I say classification of patterns, I mean like there are several classifications. We can divide Iowa counties into rural versus urban, metro versus non-metro versus micropolitan counties, farm dependent counties versus recreational counties versus manufacturing counties. We explored how these counties behave or for what trend they follow across the seven capitals. Then we figured out the strengths and challenges these counties face. And in the last theme, we explored like, are there any weaknesses which are holding them back?
Okay, so as Meenakshi mentioned, our first theme is classifying Iowa's counties and exploring patterns across community types. So we wanted to look at this theme to find how we know that some rural are isolated and others are connected by urban centers or driven by specific industries. But by classifying these counties into meaningful groups, we can analyze capital scores across different classification types and compare strength scores to more directly between urban and rural and find these differences and similarities. So the first research question we looked at under this theme was, how does capital vary across diverse community classifications? This motivation for this question to see how levels of community capital differ across these different types of communities. So we split them up into different groupings, the first being economic dependence. We then looked at geographical regions, peer population groupings, metropolitan versus micropolitan versus non-metropolitan, and lastly, urban versus rural counties. So each of these give us a unique look into how similar and different counties function and what capitals they thrive or lack in. So how we did this was first by standardizing our data into percentile scores, grouping counties based on the classification stated above, and then calculating averages for variables and capitals. All right, so first looking at our findings, we'll explore economic dependence. In this analysis, counties were grouped by the United States Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service as 26 counties that are farm dependent, 30 that are manufacturing dependent, 39 that are non-specialized, and 3 that are federal or state government dependent, and then finally 1 that is recreation dependent. So here we can see the capital scores across the different economic dependence types as a score from 0 to 100. And then we can also see it as distance away from the median. The findings that we found from this as recreation and federal and state government dependent counties stand out with high scores in many capitals, but we need to remember that there are only a few counties in these categories, making them reflective of their local conditions. We found that farm-dependent counties perform the highest in social capital, but besides minor deviations, non-specialized, farm-dependent, and manufacturing-dependent counties tend to stick close to the median. We'll next look at geographic regions. In this analysis, counties were split into 9 different geographic regions classified by the USDA's Natural Agriculture Statistics Service, where there are 9 to 12 counties in each different region. Again, we can see the capital scores from 0 to 100 in each different region. And then again, as a percent away from the median. From this, we found that no single geographic region consistently outperforms or underperforms across all capitals. Each has its own mix of strengths and weaknesses. And the deviation from the median highlights these regional outliers, such as South Central's lower political capital and Northeast's high performance in the same area, which is the green bar here and the blue bar here. Finally, this analysis showed that regional perspectives support targeted planning. By showing that community strengths vary across Iowa, this reinforces the need for tailored, localized solutions instead of a one-size-fits-all approach. We next look at peer population groupings, which is assigning counties based on an Iowa-specific classification system. This takes into account the size of the county's largest city and its urban core influence. So you can see the different types here, how many counties are in each, and then what makes them in that category. Instead of doing bar charts here, we were able to do a parallel coordinate plot, which just shows every indicator within each capital. Instead of the average capital scores, we were able to do this because there was only 5 or less categories, so it wasn't too cluttered with the lines. From this, we were able to find that metro core counties show the highest peaks and dips across all capital indicators. That's that red line here. Micro core counties show similar patterns to the metro core counties, though with less dramatic peaks. And then in contrast, rural counties display an inverse trend compared to those micro and metro core counties, particularly in those social indicators. And then metro outlying counties display a more erratic pattern with high and low scores across the capitals. That's that green line there. And then finally, small urban counties tend to show a more stable middle range performance. And that's that blue line that sticks close to the median here. Next, we were looking at metropolitan versus micropolitan versus non-metropolitan counties. These counties were designated based on the rural-urban continuum classified by the USDA's ERS, where there are 22 metropolitan counties, 16 micropolitan, and 61 non-metropolitan. Again, we can see their capital scores for each indicator. From this, we found that metropolitan and non-metropolitan counties tend to have that inverse relationship. If metro counties are scoring high in a particular indicator, non-metro counties often score lower and vice versa. And then our micropolitan counties tend to fall in the middle with strong performance in some indicators, such as access to public areas, but low performance in other indicators, such as voter turnouts or civic organizations. Then finally, we looked at urban versus rural counties. This is a different slicing of the rural-urban continuum where there's only 2 categories, where we have 22 urban and 77 rural counties. From this, we found that urban counties perform higher in most capitals, particularly built, human, and political. However, this does not mean that rural counties are always behind. In fact, they perform better in several specific indicators in all capitals except for human and political, where urban does outperform in all indicators. Urban and rural counties tend to have this inverse relationship again. If urban counties tend to score high, urban or rural are lower, and vice versa.
So continuing with medicine part, we decided to go with the rural and urban classification because we believe that that is the most simple classification that everyone would know and will be much more digestible for everyone to understand. Moving on, we know that the community capital framework is a very good framework and very in-depth, but the scope is very broad. So we decide for the sake of information, we decide to make composite scores, which would include human strength, economic strength, civic strength, infrastructure strength, stability strength, and environmental strength. Each score represent its own characteristics. For example, human strength score, which would reflect educational attainment, health status, language ability, age distribution, access to food. Then we made some box plots to compare these between rural and urban counties. For human strength score, we could see that urban counties perform way better than rural counties, and with Dallas County performing like outside like a maximum. Moving on to economic strength, surprisingly, rural counties and urban counties perform pretty much the same. The median are about the same, with Lyon County coming out top. Oh, is it? Zoom in. Yeah. So yeah, Lyon County is the one that's performing the best across all counties in economic strength. So for civic strength, we could see that again, urban counties is performing a slightly better, but the maximum of this also belongs to Winnipeg County, which is a rural county. For infrastructure strength, we first doing for 10K, and we realized rural do much better than urban counties because of the population density, which would affect what which would affect like how certain infrastructure are distributed. Then realizing a problem, we decided to make an infrastructure score for square mile, which we then see urban counties tend to do a little bit better with rural counties kind of cluster up in a much smaller range. And obviously we can know why Polk County stands up top, because it's the most populated county and with the most infrastructure. Moving on to stability strength score, we could see there's a lot more variance in rural counties, but overall the median are pretty similar and there's not much difference. Again, with environmental strength score, we can see that there's still a lot more variance with rural counties, and rural counties is performing slightly better, but not by much. Overall, we could see that both rural and urban counties perform pretty similarly across all measures, with a lot more variance in rural counties, given that we have like 77 rural counties compared to 22. One thing worth noting is Lyon County comes up top in pretty much all of the measures, which would have some questions like, where is Lyon County and why is it topping the charts everywhere? So to our next theme, we did realize that every county is unique, but they should share some similar patterns. So we then go on to try and group variables together and create a composite score that would make sense. To do this, we first approach factor analysis. And for that, we try to test for suitability of this method, because sometimes there's a risk of loss of information that's associated with factor analysis when two variables could cancel each other out. So we did Bartlett test and the K-mole test. Something on the side is for K-mole test, the benchmark we're looking for would be above 0.5. For Bartlett test, the chi-square is very good. Variables are significantly correlated, and the p-value is very small, which is suitable for factor analysis. But then moving on to the K-mole test, the value is below the benchmark, which is a sign for batch sampling adequacy. Some visualization for this is a scree plot for factor analysis. What we would want here is, as we increase the number of variables, the eigenvalues in the matrix would remain above 1. But as we see, when it moves from like 1 to 3, it drops below 1. And as we move on to 4 and 5, it just keeps going lower. So to answer, should we do factor analysis or combining related strengths? No, we shouldn't, but can we? Yes, and for the sake of our strength score, we have to, because it would make more sense and we accept the risk of there's lots of information. So moving on to, we tried to group variables before, and now we would want to see if we group counties. So for this, we have two different approaches. hierarchical clustering and latent class analysis. Hierarchical clustering, to put it simply, is a method where you would calculate the difference between two variables and take a sum and basically use a Euclidean distance between two different counties. And latent class analysis is where you convert whether a county has above or below the median and decide on a probability-based model. So before we get deeper into the clustering, the technicalities of it and the results, we encounter some problems when we deal with like ACS data and the data source. It's very common knowledge that ACS data is pretty wonky and there's like missing data all over the place. And so we decided to deal with that by impute by the mean. I've also included more step-by-step on that process in the appendix. Moving on to this is a visual of how counties are split up. We could see that there's a small box here which include Clay and Dickinson, and the rest we could see there are 5 clusters. After we got our cluster, we decided to get the strength score, as we mentioned above, for each cluster. This is a table of like detail of every cluster and their scores. And if we were to decide to dig deeper, we could we also include a table to have every score and the analysis of its weakness area, its typology, whether it's metropolitan, non-metropolitan, or rural or urban. To sum up for this method, we have 5 clusters, which most notably cluster 4, which is urban areas, which suffer from severe infrastructure deficits, which could be mentioned by why, because we use per 10K instead of per square mile. And cluster 1 is rural county with doing very well, including cluster 3, which rural counties which is performing very well in economic and human capital. Something worth noting is that the numbers do not represent a ranking system. It's just how we name it by cluster 1 to 5. And the colors do not represent whether a county is good or bad. So we take a look at Story County, which has overall score of 43.4 and has a primary weakness area of economic, which has high poverty, higher income equality. Moving on to the second method, latent class analysis, the LCA. We also produce 5 different classes, with class 1 and 5 being those that are performing very well, and most of the values are above median, with class 4 again being below median for most values. Again, here we could see there is some geographic clustering here, with class 5 mostly focusing on the north of Iowa, and class 4 is focusing more on the south, with class 3 being urban areas like Story County, Polk County, Lynn County, somewhere Davenport and Scott County. So some findings we have is that clustering reviews new county types, and each cluster has its own standout strengths. No single cluster dominates all strengths. Strength scores summarize some key differences in cluster, and maps review geographic patterns.
Moving on, we looked at how a single challenge can hold a county back. Now that we have been looking at strength scores, we get an idea that even when a county performs well in most areas, a single weak spot can limit its overall progress.
Here we address the question, if we fixed one thing, what would matter most? Uh, this analysis basically summarizes how each Iowa county performs across the six strengths we looked at before, which were human, economic, civic, infrastructure, stability, and environmental. Each of the strength score is based on percentile rankings, which are made of a subset of 5 to 9 variables on a scale from 0 to 100. To analyze this, we made two interactive bar charts. In the first one, it shows how a county does across all strength scores. So as you can see for Adair, this is the median line, which is the 50th percentile. So Adair does well above the median line in most of the strength scores, but it lacks in the human strength score and stability. To explore this into more detail, we made an interactive chart which break down all the specific variables which are used to calculate the strength scores. Right now, here you can see how Adair does across all the variables to see if it's doing well and to see what it's doing the best in and to see where it has a low score. We can further filter it down based on human or on strength areas. So the human strength is made up of 4 variables. Looking at this, we can tell that Adair County lacks in the percentage of people with bachelor's degrees. So we could say that this is what could be pulling down Adair's overall human strength score. While the above charts break down how counties performed on individual levels, we further went ahead and took a look at some of the top and bottom counties and summarized their performance by listing out their strongest area, their weakest area, and the weakest variable, which could be influencing the weakest area. So, as you can see, Lyon County falls in one of the better or the top performing counties, and it does well economically, but it lacks in stability. Whereas if we take a look at one of the bottom performing counties, Des Moines County does well in stability strength but lacks economically. Therefore, as we have been discussing, addressing even one factor, such as we looked at the improving the percentage of people with a bachelor's degree in Adair, it can lead to a higher human strength score. So we by doing this, we are exploring the possibility of a trend which is called as the spiraling down effect. However, by targeting and improving that particular factor or variable, we may initiate what is called as a spiraling up effect, where one positive change could lead to additional improvements across the county. After this, we further decided to see if population size played a factor into a county's strengths or weaknesses. So we used these group codes and categorized some of the top and bottom counties. So as you can see, among the top performing counties, they mostly belong to smaller population groups, such as the fifth, third, or fourth group, which are mostly non-metropolitan or smaller metropolitan counties. On the other hand, almost all of the bottom performing counties fall in larger population groups, which is the second group having a population of 10,000 or greater, making almost most of these non-metropolitan counties. Now that we have pinpointed the weaker areas potentially holding a county back and looked at if population sizes play a factor, we wanted to dig deeper and see what might be causing these challenges or if there are any hidden factors that are driving these strengths. So, to explore these questions, we used an interactive bivariate scatter plot. So here you can compare or see the correlation between any two variables across all counties. Um, and you can also take a look at this spatially. So the greener the color is, the higher the correlation between those two variables is. So based on various literature reviews, articles and the above interactive app, we decided to explore the following relationships into more detail. Uh, we again used bivariate scatter plots and various literature reviews. For example, to cite one of them, the Flora and Flora 2008 article informed our look at the positive correlation the between forest reserves and civic participation across Iowa. So, taking a look at some of the relationships, as you can see, for when we compared cropland proportion in a county versus its volunteering rates, it showed a slightly negative relationship. This could be due to fewer civic institutions or travel distances. On the other hand, when we compared proportion of counties with forest reserves across volunteering rates, it showed a slightly positive relationship, which went hand in hand with the literature that we reviewed. So, this might reflect that stronger place attachment, natural spaces help people feel more invested in their communities. Uh, Further, we decided to see if there was any correlation between various natural disasters such as tornadoes, hailstorms, or wind, and volunteering rates across a county. Uh, the black line is the overall trend line. The blue one is for the urban counties, and then the red trend line is for rural counties. So, taking a look at the overall trend line, it showed a moderate negative relationship between the natural disaster frequency and the volunteering rates. This could suggest that areas more frequently impacted by disasters face barriers to sustained civic engagement or possibly resource strains. Apart from that, we took a look at income, education, and unemployment rates across Iowa. So, as you can see, income and education show a very strong positive relationship. So, the higher the income is, the more percent of bachelor's degrees are given out. So, this supported the idea that wealthier counties have more access to investment in education institutions. But on the other hand, surprisingly, when we compared education versus the unemployment rates, it showed a very small positive relationship. So, as education went up, unemployment also goes up a little. However, the dots are scattered, so there could be other factors that may be influencing education unemployment rates more than education levels alone.
So the next question we addressed under this theme was, what role does inequality play in society? The motivation for this question is to explore the role inequality plays in shaping well-being throughout communities. This also helps reveal which counties experience the highest and lowest forms of inequality. So we've created 5 different inequality domains to assess this. First, economic inequality, which shows income disparities and financial instability. We next have family and social inequality, which shows how supported and connected a community is for families. We next have education and access inequality, which reflects access to education and essential services like internet or language support. We then have health inequality, which reflects disparities in healthcare access and exposure to environmental health risks. And then finally, we have our disaster and infrastructure inequality. This reflects a community's vulnerability to natural disasters and housing insecurity. And then finally, we've compared these to our well-being indicators, which show overall quality of life, civic engagement, and public safety. By comparing these domains to well-being indicators, we can identify which types of inequality are most strongly tied to community outcomes, but also which counties may need targeted support. So how we did this was, again, standardizing the data using percentile scores, grouping the variables based on our literature reviews and research frameworks to make our inequality domains and well-being indicators, and then finding correlation between our inequality domains and well-being. And then finally, visualizing our analysis with bar chart comparisons and mapping our results. So for findings, as I said, we did a correlation matrix to see if our inequality domains lined up with well-being. As we can see, the correlation matrix illustrates that lower inequality is associated with higher community well-being. Each inequality domain shows a positive correlation here with well-being, meaning that as inequality decreases, overall well-being increases in a community. And then we can also see which inequality domains have the highest correlation to each other. For example, education and access and health inequality have a strong positive correlation there. And then moving on to visualize this, we've made an interactive bar chart to see any county's inequality scores. So for example, here we have Washington County with a low health score or much inequality in health in this county. And then we can move on to see which variables within this score are contributing. So again, here we have Washington County, and we're looking at that health domain. We can see the scores for each individual variable within this health score. So some air pollution or hazard waste proximity, low rates of health insurance, or access to hospitals maybe are contributing to this low score in health. And then finally, we have a map of the inequality domains. So we can see each county's score spatially through each inequality domain. And then this reveals spatial patterns we have within our data. For example, in disaster and infrastructure inequality, most of this is concentrated towards the west. But if we're looking at economic inequality, most of that is concentrated in the south. Overall, this analysis reinforces the idea that as we reduce inequality in these areas, it could lead to a meaningful improvements in the overall quality of life. As we discussed earlier, addressing even one factor within these inequality domains can cause a spiraling up effect. For example, in Washington County, if we made additional improvements, for example, improving the health insurance rates, it could cause crucial to improving the well-being.
Okay, then we did some exploratory work, which include grouping counties on housing condition, interactive radar charts to compare capitals across counties, and we explored Yale climate opinion change data, and we compared built capital with per 10K with per square mile, and principal component analysis to analyze the covariance among the variables. So among this exploratory work, little bit I would like to talk about is grouping counties based on their housing condition. So motivation for this question was to like housing problems may look different in every place. Like some places have all homes, some places have high rents or bad internet access. So when we group these county based on similar patterns, what we can do, we can like support these counties where they need the most, and what kind of we can figure out what kind of support they need. So to make these groupings, we came up with three models. Model A is all about housing infrastructure, and here you can see the variables we used for that model. Model B is about affordability and stress model. Here you can see like the variables we used for that model. And model C is after infrastructure affordability. We explored how economic pressure affect the housing conditions, and you can see the variables for that here as well. So for that, to explore these and to group these counties, what we did, we made an interactive dashboard clustering Iowa counties in tiers. Here you can see for every model, model A, B, C, we cluster counties in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 means strong housing conditions, tier 2 means moderate housing, and tier 3 means need support. These counties are not doing well. Then we looked into what are the particular strengths and weaknesses for each county. And as we talk, where is Lyon County? Here it is. And where it is really strong in it's doing strong in plumbing and needs improvement in median year built. Here you can see the value for every variables and which percentile that value falls into. And then we made a choropleth variable map where you can explore the how every variables varies across Iowa. If I show you broadband, it's pretty high. The broadband conditions looks good in Iowa. If you want to explore other variables, you can see like what about like poverty looks like in Iowa. You can see like the county here, Wright County have like particularly high poverty rate. And then we looked at the tier movement. When we looked at like okay the counties in model A, B, and C. When we move from model A to B and B to C, how many counties have shifted their tiers? Like initially they fall into tier 1 and then they move to tier B as we add affordability and stress and economic stress. You can see that table here, and you can see that for particular counties as well. Here you can see for cluster A the averages of every tier as well. So why we build this interactive dashboard is to help local leaders see strengths and challenges together, and it makes it easy to compare counties across different housing factors and help decision makers the right kind of support in the right places. The key takeaways from this dashboard can be like we can figure out from tier movements like what are the who are which are the counties which are stable performance and counties which are high risk counties. For stable performance, counties that stayed in tier 1 across models had comparatively newer homes, high broadband access, and low housing burden. And counties that are in high risk, they need strong term house. They are facing strong term housing instabilities, and counties that stay in tier 3 require long term structural investment. And we worked on interactive radar charts as well, where you can see how every county is doing on each capital. If you choose a county like how Black Hawk County is doing across capitals, you can see like it's doing better in political capital and like bad in built capital. You can overlay another county to compare it with other counties. For example, the Appanese County, you can see the Appanese County is pretty bad, pretty low in every score, but it's doing good in natural capital as compared to the Black Hawk County. That's other exploratory work we did. If I talk about limitations in this project, is the capital score, the 10 scores, the inequality scores we made do not factor in the influence of surrounding counties or location outside of Iowa. That's one challenge we face. Another challenge we faced when we building human strength score or inequality scores, we had used so many variables, but when you interpret those findings based on these scores, we should consider that there might be other variables that we don't have in our data might be influencing those results. And most of our analysis reflects a snapshot in time and does not reflect the time series analysis. That's what we would like to explore further. So what we have delivered so far, we have delivered intense literature-based 6 strength scores and 5 inequality indicators. And we have explored place-based patterns where you can show how classifications like rural versus urban, metro versus non-metro, and micropolitan counties tend to follow different trends across the 7 capitals. And we made clustering analysis which shows similar strengths and challenges together, which you can explore on interactive maps and dashboard. And then we explored targeted support priorities, like if there is any particular weakness that's holding a county back, we explore those weaknesses, and local governments can work on that, improve those areas. For next steps, we would like to build a county level resilience index, which combine multiple variables across capitals into a single resilience score to identify which counties are best equipped to handle shocks. And then we would like to do time series analysis and study policy impact. There has been several policies introduced in Iowa time and again, like broadband grants, and we would like really explore how these programs improved capital score over time or not. And then we would like to further do ground truthing to use local stories to validate or challenge what the number shows in this project. And we would really like to thank Bailey Henson, our project advisor, Harun Chelik, our program coordinator, and Professor Sam Mendes for his sociological insights, and Ben Jacobs for his statistical insights. Thank you.